Hey everybody, welcome back. If you're new here, hi, I'm Mercury. So today, we're going to do a book review. I finished another book. So cool. I've read so many books this year. I really think this is like my record. This is like a record-setting year for books I've completed. So my latest book that I finished reading is The Devil and the Dark Water by Stuart Turton. And you might recognize that author's name because earlier I finished reading The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. Same author. And I didn't even realize it was the same author until I got to the end of the book. And I was just like, oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. I get it. So it's an author I've read before, but I didn't realize that going into it. Like, I didn't pick this book because I recognized the author, if that makes sense. So, what is this book about? As always, I'm going to do my best to keep this spoiler free and really just give away no more than would be like on the back cover of the book. So this book is about a ship that is on a cursed voyage. That is the most simple way of describing it. There's an event that happens at the beginning of the book, and it leads into a series of like strange and unexplained things, and then some darker things. It almost becomes like a whodunit kind of mystery. I was going to say it's not a question of which person it is, but it is that too. But it's also a question of, is it a ghost that's causing the problems on board? Or is it something less mystical and there's something else going on here? And this book has a lot of different characters who both work together and against each other in order to progress the plot towards figuring this out. What did I think of this book? I enjoyed reading this book, but it did have a big lull in it for me. So what I mean by that, it started out good. It started out, there was this really dramatic event at the very beginning of the book. So you're like, oh my gosh, what's going on here? What is this? What's this about? And it really sets a stage that there's something really ominous at work here. And trying to sort of like decipher like what that meant, like, and how it's going to affect the characters and the story going forward. And then they all get on board the ship and you start getting introduced to all the characters. And there are a lot of characters. And they all play different roles in progressing the story, and all of them important. And because there are a lot of different characters, and there are some that knew each other before getting on board the ship, there are some that met each other on the ship, sort of like understanding who they are, their timelines, their histories, where they sort of like intersect with each other, who knows who's a sailor versus who's like nobility just catching a ride. You know, it's like all these different elements of not just who's who, but where they are in sort of like the hierarchy of like the ship, and how that affects how they're able to interact with each other, what parts of the ship they're allowed to go to. You know, like gender roles, because this takes place, you know, in a time where there were very specific gender roles, and like, you know, women had to dress a certain way and so on and so forth. So like wrapping your brain around all of the players for me really slowed me down. It really, like, the book was going, and then it just like bump on the brakes, and then it really slowed down. And I'm like trying to absorb the characters and their roles with each other and how they interrelate to each other, and trying to get through that portion of the story. Because while that's going on, they're also dropping breadcrumbs. They're still stuff around, you know, this big question of like who done it, what's going on, is there a ghost, right? There's still all these questions about that looming, and they're still trying to, like, the characters are trying to understand, you know, what they're dealing with on board, and, you know, how to navigate that and survive it, and, you know, all of that. And this combination of trying to, like, understand the mystery of the main plot with this ghost, while trying to simultaneously understand the depth of all of these characters. And they are deep characters. They are rich characters in terms of, their backgrounds, the way they're fleshed out. But it's dense. It was dense for me. And like I said, it caused a lull in the middle of the book for me. And then once I sort of passed, I'd say the halfway to 60% of the way mark in the book, I got my footing, I got my traction, and then I was just like, ooh, okay, we're going to the finish line on this. And also, the story got a little more exciting at that point too. So the pace, the interactions, everything picked up. And the foundation was laid during that slower part of the book for me to really understand all these different characters and all these little breadcrumbs that they were dropping all the way up to that point. So it's one of those kind of similar to Anne Rice books sometimes. I get this feeling with Anne Rice sometimes when I read her books, which is it starts out good and then it slows down because there's so much of a world that's being created that you have to unpack it. And then that momentum kicks back in. And then you're like, oof, we're going. And I feel like the same exact thing happened when I was reading The Devil in the Dark Water. So how would I rate this book? I would give this book, I'm going to say 7 boat sails. 7 boat sails. That's the ranking system I'm giving on this. 7 boat sails. 7 out of 10. So it was a good book. It was worth the read. And the only reason I took boat sails off of my ranking is because of that lull, because it really slowed me down too much. It was too much of a pause. I don't mind getting slowed down, but it was a little too much for me. So that is what I thought of The Devil in the Dark Water. So now I have to find my next book to read. What's it going to be? I have a huge reading list. I have a huge list on Goodreads of all the books I want to read. And it just keeps growing. And I read a lot, but I am not that fast of a reader. So, I got a lot of books I want to get through. So on to the next one. And I guess with that, I'm done for the day. I'll see you all real soon. And until then, stay inspired by everyone. Take care.